Hello, everyone. Welcome to Panel 2, Working with Community. I'm Ying Kwok, a Hong Kong-based curator and also the festival director of Peer-to-Peer UK Hong Kong Festival. There is a few housekeeping rules to share with you before we started. Firstly, this session is being recorded and will be added to the Peer-to-Peer website at a later date. Secondly, it's also being simultaneously interpreted into Cantonese. Thank you for WMA support to make it possible. Should you wish to listen to this, please use the select language function at the bottom of your screen. And finally, we will actively encourage questions and comments from the audience. So please submit this through the chat function at the bottom of your screen. I will be monitoring this, and we hope to have time to put this to the panel toward the end of the session. I'm now delighted to hand it over to James Green from Newly Arts Gallery and the Exchange from UK, and also chair of this session. So James, hand over to you.
Ying, thank you very much. Yes, as Ying says, I'm the director of Newlyn Art Gallery and the Exchange. We're two visual arts organisations based down in the far southwest of Cornwall. We're in our second phase of lockdown in the UK. I snuck into one of our galleries, so I'm sitting in our one of our display spaces now. I'm very pleased to be back in the building. It's hard to overstate what an extraordinary year we've all had, but perhaps it's a perfect moment for us to think again or think afresh about how we engage with community, learn through this sort of extraordinary period of our history. Here in the UK, rather cloaked by the COVID pandemic and the murder of George Floyd and of course the Hong Kong protests, is a kind of rumbling discussion about Brexit and how the UK might extract itself from the European Union. And I have to say, I probably turned off half the contributors to this session, observers to this session. Brexit is such an exhausting subject to raise in these sorts of contexts, but it threw up some very interesting, the referendum threw up some very interesting points for me, points of reflection. And I think the big shock for us all in the UK was how it illustrated just how profoundly divided UK society is. And you could, I guess, characterise the split into two groups: those who have economic, political, social, even cultural agency, and those that don't. And this fact feels like a very relevant piece of information for our discussion around communities and how we as cultural organisations aim to work in ways that are relevant to the people we want to reach, regardless of which side of this agency divide they might sit. So visual arts organisations working with communities is, of course, nothing new. In the UK, we can trace back very live discussions around community art to the 70s and the rise of art centres in the UK. But also, I'm reminded that in my own organisation, which dates back to its origins date back to the late 19th century, we were founded by a rather amazing philanthropist and social reformer called John Passmore Edwards. And he had this vision that culture might provide, and I quote, culture might provide a ladder at which the poor may climb out of poverty. And whilst this language might seem a little bit pompous to our contemporary ears, it does at least indicate that there's been a long history of engagement with this notion that culture might bring some sort of benefit to audiences or communities that we may feel are most marginalised. And of course, artists and arts organisations in Hong Kong, as we'll see today, are just as engaged in these discussions and debates around what we might describe as organisation civic role. So for the next 50 minutes, I want to discuss, I'll consider a number of questions. I wanted to look at how we might approach, or how do we approach communities, perhaps in subtly different ways in Hong Kong and in the UK, and what it is that we can learn from each other's comparative practice. Also thinking very much about this amazing network, the peer-to-peer network. What is it? What opportunities lie within the network for us as participants to learn from each other's practice and form new partnerships for the benefit of the communities we seek to serve. So none of us are going to forget 2020 in a hurry. So how have these events I've described directly affected communities? Well, we've got a great panel, I'm pleased to say, to help discuss those issues. I'm going to introduce them now. The first contributor is Stuart Tulloch, who's head of programme at First Sight. Now, Stuart is standing in for Sally Shaw, who's the director of First Sight, and unfortunately is taken away in other important matters today. But as Stuart doesn't have a bit of a sort of CV in the delegate pack, I've asked him to introduce himself in a slightly more extended way than the other panel members. So over to you, Stuart.
Hello everybody.
I apologise for interrupting. James, just before Stuart does his introduction, could you please move to a space that's perhaps smaller, just because the audio is just a little bit inconsistent. So it might be a bit clearer if you move to a smaller space with no reverb. Apologies for interrupting. Over to you, Stuart.
Thank you, and thank you, James. I'm Stuart Tulloch. I'm head of programme at First Sight in Colchester. So my journey to here, that I have worked in a range of organisations. I sometimes feel like I'm on a tour of the UK of visual arts organisations, and I began at a university gallery in Newcastle, and then I moved to Hayward Gallery in London, where I organised and helped organise exhibitions, including an exhibition of contemporary Japanese art. From there, I went back to my hometown of Blackpool, which is in the northwest of England, not so far away from Liverpool and from Manchester. And Blackpool is for those that don't know it, is very much a very important town within the development of popular culture within the 20th century, within the UK. And I spent almost 10 years there, making a programme that was very reflective of Blackpool and its culture, its significant culture. From that, then I moved to Birmingham, and I became curator of Icon Gallery in the city. I still live in Birmingham, so I'm speaking to you from Birmingham today. And then with a couple of things in between, I then kind of landed at First Sight 4 or 5 years ago. Back over to you, James.
Thank you. Dash across the building. So the rest of the panel I'd like to introduce are Charlotte Frost, who's the director of Furtherfield Gallery. We have Liz Wewiora, who's the head of social practice at Open Guy Gallery in Liverpool. We have Ivy Lin, who is curator at Oi Space in Hong Kong. And finally, Bruce Lee, assistant curator of learning at Chat. So the first question I really wanted to consider in a little bit more detail is this sort of very fundamental one, this question of how, in the context of our current times, how has our programming changed and adapted to respond to the changing needs of the audiences that we seek to serve? So I think I've asked each of our panel during the course of this hour-long session to do a very brief presentation. So there will be some visual material now which helps us explore this theme. So if we can start, Stuart, with your presentation, that would be brilliant.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So to give you some context to First Sight and also to Colchester, in which it's set, and also maybe to my role as well. So as head of programme, then my role is then to look at both the learning programme and also the exhibitions programme, and that's that's very deliberate in that the programmes that we set out don't to try and challenge those hierarchies that are there, that it's usually about exhibitions and that learning then follows. And then we have been, over the past 4 years in particular, making something where that it's kind of shared and they have equal value and they're beginning to work more and more together. For First Sight itself, it's a visual arts organisation. It's publicly funded. It's based in Colchester in Essex, and there's just a location of where we are in the UK in the southeast region. As Colchester as well is significant in the UK. It is the oldest recorded town in Britain. It has Roman heritage. It's seen lots of radical history. It's seen uprising. It's also a small town there, so a significant history there. And with the program that we put together, it's very much about the communities that are now based there and how we work with them. There are images here of First Sight and the building, a extraordinary building that opened almost 10 years ago now. We will celebrate our 10th anniversary in that building next year, but as an organization goes back to 1994. When it first opened, the building was criticized for being just not suitable for an art gallery. So to give you an idea, if you can see the entrance there, but also kind of from above, that huge curve is roughly 140 meters in length. The walls inside, they curve upwards, they curve around. There's very few straight walls in First Sight. It struggled to begin with. When it first opened, with such a remarkable, extraordinary building in what is quite a small, conservative town. And it's taken some time to kind of work out what it is and to find its mojo. And it's found that by working with its communities and by inviting those people into the building, what we soon found, and where the recent success of First Sight as an organization was to start letting people in, use the building as they wanted it to use. Within the plan there, at the bottom of that slide, there's so much space at First Sight that there are other areas that people can meet. It became at one point the home of Friday prayers for the Muslim community while the mosque was being refurbished. It's also now the centre for Colchester Pride. There is a Rice and Spice Festival. We have meetings from various religious groups who use that space. What we were then finding then was that whilst we could then bring in this community, that it was for their own purposes, it was for their own meetings. And so we have been working about how we can then develop that into a program. What we, in that combination that we've done, the real thing that we've, I suppose, has given us the kind of foundation to do that is working with the Arts Council Collection National Partners Programme, of which Newlyn is also a partner in that. It's given us the resources, it's given us the time to think about how we can do it. And so we have set out a programme working with communities in Colchester about what is important to them. And the first project we did was called Super Black, and that was working with the Black African Caribbean communities to make an exhibition that would be about what they wanted it to be, of using that collection. From that has spun legacy projects, of which then this is one here, funded more funding, but working with the individuals that took part in that project in order to do more and to do more online. And this then available on our website is about looking at their histories, about how also that their skills, what their interest is part of. And we continue in that. It meant also, because we're much more, as a staff team, I think we're fairly typical of being very white, of being from one particular place, a demographic. But with the people that we're using, that helping that kind of influence us. And one artist that was part of that Super Black program, an artist called Elsa James, who then, when that moment came for us to kind of then stand in solidarity, think about our own programs and what we're doing, then we ask Elsa, then, who made this work, who made this flag that we put online and which people could share in their windows. There are other things that we did at that time with artists. We made activity packs that, with the artists that we'd worked with in the past, of I suppose celebrity artists, particular names in the UK. We brought together 4 packs during lockdown, We're very much about things to make and do at home. And this is one that is an activity that's being done from an idea proposed by Gillian Waring. I suppose to kind of then say of, we kind of looked at the resources that we had to hand, of the things that we did at this time and what we could get online and what we could get on for people. To kind of conclude this presentation, where we've got to is to ask people much more directly and to listen about what it is that the program, what they need from the program, what they do from First Sight, and how we kind of make that together. One thing that is of great influence to me is a curator now based in the States, Robert Blackson, who the Temple Gallery in Philadelphia asked the community, what is it? Give me your questions and I will answer them. And we've now brought that into our program at First Sight too. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stuart. That was brilliant. We'll pick up on some questions that are arising from that in a moment. I probably should point out, First Sight's really had an amazing profile in the last year for the work that it's done, particularly during lockdown. Its attempts to reach much more significant audiences locally, nationally, and actually internationally as well. So we'll pick up on some of that in a moment. But first of all, I wanted to bring Ivy in and ask her if you would do her short presentation, and then we'll look at this theme in a bit more detail, if that's okay, Ivy.
Okay, I would like to start our presentation with introducing our site. Actually, our name is Oil, and because we are situated with our address on the Oil Street, that's why we call it Oil Street Art Space. So the short name is Oil. We established the art space in 2013, but it was by the time actually it was a vacated building. Oil Street Art Space is a government-run art space, and it's a sister office to art museums in Hong Kong. Well, we carry the aim to bring art out of the museum settings and into everyday life. And we humbly revisit the relationship between art and culture. So our boundaries, we do not have any boundaries on art forms. We have performances, we have visual art, and we have musical performances as well. So we would like to search for its fundamental qualities and questioning where art has come from and where it will go. Oil provides a platform where people can share experiences, history, vision, and the roles of people can be switched always, and ideas can be exchanged. In the process of various encounters, people interacted with each other and often be empowered and be inspired. Through continuous process of reflection, negotiation, debate, and consultation, we together produce knowledge, create trust, make values, and build strong relationships with the community. The artistic production and the site-specific context of Oil always reflect the social life of people, composing the collective memory and identity of the people. This project is an art video screening in TVs of local restaurants. It is an attempt to establish cultural communities in the neighborhood and offer peer networks and a shared identity of locality. For this project, we target to build a community with empathy. During the COVID-19 period, our art space had been closed twice for 6 months together. So 4 months from February to May and 2 months from mid-July to September. In the times of struggles, there is no date for reopening, and it was not anticipated at all. The normal practices of working with the communities face-to-face did not sound. We simultaneously embraced the new normal and learned from the crisis, offering virtual platform for people to exchange experiences and create ideas together. We promptly changed some of our programs and workshops into videos and display them online, with an aim to assist people to repair and reconstruct lives by themselves at home. We understand that is not a perfect solution to work with the communities like that, and that we are in search of better ways of connections with people. But let's take 1 minute of why our recent program to refresh our minds and restart our life. That's it.
That was brilliant. Thank you, Ivy. I wondered how, from what you've learned, I mean, what would you say are the key things that you've learned over the past few months, and things that perhaps may influence the way you change your program in the years ahead, Ivy?
Well, actually, in the last few months, we take a long rest and we always stay at home to work. And we are doing videos from time to time to program to record the program and then to stage them online. But I don't think it is a very effective way to work with the communities. But we are looking forward to new ways to have more interaction with them. And we believe face-to-face interaction or virtual connection is very important, for working with the communities. But at this moment, we do not find a very good way to do that. I think doing videos online is not the perfect way to connect with the communities.
And Stuart, how have you sort of overcome that? Because I'm sure that you've been delivering some programs digitally as well, but clearly you've not relied entirely on digital for engaging people remotely.
No, we haven't. I suppose for the groups that we work with most regularly, we've continued making projects with them, and we've been able to do that online. What we did do, what I didn't get to in that presentation is the Art is Where the Home Is packs that we made through that time. And whilst we couldn't make exhibitions, we made those activity packs. They've so far reached 60,000 people across the world. And from the responses that we've had back, we know that they're going across the world because people then post things back like the slide I showed. They also grew our online audience by 80%. By 300%. And when we surveyed people for what they were getting out of that, about that project, 80% of people said they'd never been into the building. So it was brand new. So now we're kind of then, how can we continue working with this online audience that are there and interested? And then how can we continue working with people that want to come back into the building? I think kind of the people are there, they come back and they start using the building again when it was open. And I think up until the point of last week when it had to lock down again, we started those connections. All those groups, of course, then are busy making things happen for their communities as well. And we're listening into that.
Great. Yeah, I think there's a question of this balance between digital and non-digital strategies to engage audiences remotely is a really interesting one. And then certainly your experience, Stuart, of being able to engage with audiences internationally more meaningfully through non-digital approaches is very interesting. I wonder, Liz or Bruce, whether you have that experience without sharing any information that's in your forthcoming presentations. Do you have kind of learning around new approaches to reach kind of more distributed audiences through lockdown?
You want me to go first? Okay. Yeah, I mean, well, with Open Eye Gallery, what we found is just a general need to be more flexible with the approach to how we work with people in general. So it's not to say that everything moves online or we do everything remotely, but actually going forward, what we found is that some people have really embraced online as an alternative, or embrace that kind of step removed engagement where, like Stuart said, we've been able to send out postal packs or activity packs either online or in the post. And yes, it slows down the process of how people are interacting with you, but actually it's more valuable. Because then, 2-3 months later, you'll find out that somebody in Melbourne took part and gets in contact with you about it, who we never would have reached otherwise. But then particularly with our local communities on the ground level, it's been a real mix. So although we work with defined community groups, even within those individual groups, different individuals respond differently. So some really engage online really well. Others, it takes a long time. It's a slow burner. And others actually would rather have a phone call with you and then check in that way on how they're working on their project. So I think it's about understanding that one trick does not work for everybody, even when they're in designated groups or community settings. So just having that flexibility and generally being able to slow down with the delivery of program to reflect that, I think.
I completely agree with Liz on moving forward, being flexible, and always planning for an alternative in upcoming programs. Speaking from CHAT, standing for the Center for Heritage Arts and Textile, there is a heavy emphasis on the medium of textiles in addition to the subject matter of textiles. And naturally with textiles, there's a lot of tactility involved. And we really try to grasp onto what it means to work with our hands in times of COVID or social distancing. I think one of the most straightforward methods we've developed, and I think in some ways succeeded, is we try to mail out packs of materials to people, and we host workshops once people has received those materials. I think it's also important to think about, for us, who we engage to lead those workshops. In our community, in our neighboring community, there are a lot of veteran workers, sewers, seamstresses. So we try to have them come back and lead those workshops. And although the public and that community of veteran workers we always work with is unable to come as a visitor, their sort of role changed. They're able to come in as instructors or as a different, in a different role, yeah.
I thought there was a very interesting question from the first session, which was about an idea of a different pace of working. I just wondered whether any of you had that experience during COVID. Obviously there's kind of a frenetic activity behind the scenes, I'm sure, but in terms of the kind of pace of engagement with audiences, did you feel that changed? There was a different sort of relationship in that way? Anybody? Not so much, evidently. This conversation about digital is very interesting. It's only in relation to, Charlotte, your work at Furtherfield, which is an organisation which is very focused on digital. I wonder, it's probably a good time to hear a little bit about your organisation, the work that you've been doing.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's really exciting to see people and to talk. In answer to your question about change of pace, I think from our perspective, or from my perspective, the sort of the frenetic energy that goes into being a small arts organisation and keeping all of those balls in the air is the same. But in terms of engagement, I think actually there has been some slowdown and some working at a different pace where we have been able to engage slightly differently. I think partly because the program changed, and so then we had to rethink ways in, and we had to slow down in order to rethink those ways in. But I would say, you know, some different rhythms have been happening. Let me just share screen and hop in over here. Okay, so to give you an introduction to Furtherfield and then to pick up on some of those points, yes, we have a strong digital background, and I think what people have been talking about so far in different approaches really comes down to the essence of where we started in terms of networked activity. So I think a lot of these mail out packs, which are amazing and fantastic and really exciting, and we haven't been able to do yet. We've had one project that we want to pivot in that way, but haven't done the development yet to do it. But to me, that really speaks to mail out projects and, you know, kind of earlier networks of activity. And I think more organizations that haven't done that in the past are sort of seeing the potential behind those types of projects. And likewise, working in a co-creational way. I mean, I think we're all organizationally here talking a lot anyway about co-creational work. I think the way in which we're all connecting with our communities comes from that community embedded in co-creational practice. And certainly that's where Furtherfield came from in terms of our approach. So Furtherfield started in 1996, and we've always been interested in what new technologies do to enhance the way we can build co-creational networks. And we've always been really invested in exploring and defining new technologies before they get the opportunity to define us. So, you know, breaking, hacking, disrupting those technologies and finding out what are different ways of using them, different approaches. And that's led to a number of co-creational approaches within a philosophy we call DIWO. The phrase DIWO was coined by Furtherfield founders Mark Garrett and Ruth Catlow in 2006. It had been applied to earlier projects. I've just summarized here on this slide some of the kind of I suppose aims, goals of the organization, things that underpin what we do. So for us, DIWO is the concept of doing things with others. It's not do it yourself, it's do it with other people, do it with as many people as you can. So we're really talking about the idea of producing collaborative experiences, producing co-creational models, widely discovering and widely sharing the types of technological artworks that engage with the debates of our time, and working with free and open source softwares as much as possible. So trying to move away from closed proprietary systems as much as we can. A number of projects from the early days that I think are always worth mentioning in introductions to our work. We had a project from 1998 called Day In, Day Out. And the best way of describing that was it was a blogging project just at the cusp of, I mean, blogging, technically blogging was a term by then, but you didn't have blogging platforms as we understood them sort of 5 to 6 years later. Another early project of ours was Skin Strip, which was working with the BBC and using technology to create a collaborative portrait. And one that I've written about extensively long before I was involved in Furtherfield was called Visitor Studio, and that was a platform from 2003 that allowed people with really very little or no technical capabilities to mix audio and visual live together in a website space online. So you could pick materials that were already there or add your own. We are based in Finsbury Park, which is an urban park, a green space in the middle of North London. It is a park that was created just over 150 years ago, very much for a working class local population to have a green space. And it soon became known as the People's Park. And it has traditionally been a site of protest and a site of a lot of social unrest. And it's described today as super diverse. because we have huge migrant communities nearby. There are over 200 languages spoken locally, and it's also within the park itself is at the intersection of 3 London boroughs, so it's quite a contested space. But we're within the park and then within the borough of Haringey. And Haringey is the London local authority with the largest amount of wealth disparity. We've produced projects like this collaboration with Umbrellium and the Museum of London. This is called Voice Over Finsbury Park, and I'll drop some links to some of these in the chat shortly. This is a project where we created a temporary broadcasting network in a tower block that overlooks the park. You can see in the window, there's like a neon light, and everybody who participated had this light to show when they were broadcasting, and they would talk about what was going on in their lives and build this temporary discursive network space. In terms of what we've been doing this year with all of the difficulties of this year, the things that I would always come back to that are the way in which we're working and what's important to us, and it's definitely been picked up by people talking already, is beginning with the outreach work and starting with the community. How do you do the right community connection work to then build a project together so that people really have ownership of that project, rather than, as has been traditional in some areas of the artwork kind of art world, producing an exhibition and then marketing and saying, come and see this exhibition. And as with the other panelists, we're very interested and try to increase the ways in which we begin with community, we begin with that outreach and connection. Also for us, we don't like to think of digital technology as a broadcast system. It's not a way of just extending your reach. It's not a way of just saying, here's what we've done and here's how we can get it out in the world. It should, we hope, form more of those networks of exchange. So we pivoted various projects to allow us to work in slightly different ways, and those have used methods that have already been discussed. So the project that I really want to flag up just before I finish this quick introduction to us is something called Culture Stake. Since 2015, 2016, we've been obsessed with blockchain technology. Don't ask me to define blockchain technology. I still don't have that down in the perfect quick slide. But what interests us about blockchain technology is the way in which it creates transparency, the way in which it can build trust. What we're trying to do with it is use it to underpin activities where it doesn't matter if you know what blockchain technology is, it doesn't matter if you know that blockchain technology is there, except that in the effect of using the tool or participating in the project, you will feel a greater sense of ownership, of trust, of shared experience. So Culture Stake is a tool that we've been developing. It uses quadratic voting, which is a way of allowing people to make decisions that has more nuance to it. It's underpinned by blockchain technology, and we're pivoting it to be delivered as an online system. The point is that it creates a situation wherein arts organisations and communities can collaborate together on making cultural decisions. So people can be directly choosing the types of arts experiences they want to have through this system. To explain it in terms of how it would operate, you would have a selection event where you would showcase kind of introductions or tasters to larger projects. And then communities can use the tool, which is really playful, really good fun, in order to express their opinions. What quadratic voting does is the cost of your vote, not financial cost, but the token cost goes up and down. So you have to adjust and change your mind as you go along, which means that you really have to be making a decision. You can't, or making a decision where you pick one way or the other. You can't go kind of middle of the road down everything. And you can apply curatorial questions to this. So you can really open up and make the curatorial experience something that everybody does together. So it's a project we're really excited. It got derailed massively by COVID because we were expecting to have live events around it, but we're rebuilding it for an online context and really hoping to be collaborating with different arts organisations in the future to test this out and to see how it can provide a more engaged and more empowering experience for different communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charlotte. That's great. I've got a couple of questions coming through from the floor, which I just wanted to get to. One is for you, Ivy, which refers to your the project that you did in the cafes, presenting art videos in a community context. And the question was really about how people responded to engaging with work in that situation.
Well, actually, that program was very successful because we displayed the art videos in the cafe and also in some very small local shops, and then people suddenly found that something's changed and something different from their usual experience, and that is the reason why they start to admire and start to question what it is, and to find out the answer, what is that about and what's happening, and who is the artist, and why the shop allows us to display the video. So we have a restaurant map, so people can follow the map and then go into every restaurant that we engage with, and then they can see the whole program by themselves.
Great, thank you. And there's another question which is about, which I'm sure people would recognise. There's a question about are panelists concerned about leaving members of the community behind when engaging with digital projects because of the issue around digital poverty? I wonder if anybody would like to speak to that. Charlotte, maybe you.
Yeah, of course. Yes, always yes to that question. We've worked to respond to that in a number of different ways. A project of ours from I want to say it's 2012 is $0 laptop, which was a project where we worked with the homeless charity St. Mungo's. And that was a project where we asked for donations of laptops. We removed the existing proprietary software. We installed Linux, and we ran workshops with homeless people who we gifted the laptops to. They were creative workshops so that everybody who was then given a laptop would learn how to use the Linux system through a really, much more engaging self-directed approach, because you're building something creative that you care about, so that laptop could be maintained over time. If you're using a free and open source software like that, you are not having all of the stupid upgrades and various other things that we all get tied into when we buy laptops with proprietary software. And this project was based on research that showed that one of the most valuable things that somebody who didn't have a permanent address would need was an email address, because it was one of the first ways that you could then register yourself for employment, register yourself to get a bed for the night, register to get access to other provisions or benefits. So we do work on very specific projects that tackle that type of exclusion when and where we can. And it is something that we come back to. And quite honestly, if Mark Garrett, our director, were here now, he would very vocally say that for us, we have huge problems with the fact that we rely still on proprietary softwares or platforms that are exclusionary, not just from not being able to get access to the internet, but exclusionary in terms of the business models that underpin those platforms. So yes, it's really important to us, and it's something that we're always working on as best we can.
Thanks, Charlotte. I want to kind of move on in the last sort of quarter of an hour of the session. Think a little bit about partnership working. Again, there's a theme that came up in the first session. I'm sure it'll pepper throughout these discussions over the next few days. But and I also want to give Liz and Bruce an opportunity to share a little bit about their activity. So, Bruce, could you perhaps do your presentation now, and then we'll see Liz's and pick up on some questions.
Yes, sure. So, hello everyone. Once again, I am Bruce, Assistant Curator at Chat. I'd like to start with this graphic right here, which if you look to the upper left is an extension of our logo. We are an institution that's very much dealing with textile as a subject matter. So we try to think a little bit metaphorically about the construction of our warp and weft. It's a pretty graphic. But I think it's quite symbolic of how we try to think about what Charlotte has just mentioned, this idea of co-creation in a more sort of horizontal way of going forward with our programming, including what Stuart said in the beginning, thinking about programming and exhibitions together at the same time. Just as a brief background, Chat, we are actually housed within a former cotton spinning mill in Hong Kong, which was in business spinning cotton yarns from the 50s to the late 2000s. So we're, as you know, we're very young. Spinning stopped around late 2000s, and revitalization of this space into what it is now really only happened within the past decade. And Chat as an institution began operating within this space just March of 2019. So we're quite a small team, but we hope to really bridge connections and showcase textiles in different ways in contemporary art, design, as well as through the heritage stream. So right now, this slide that we're seeing is how we deal with textiles through heritage. This is our permanent gallery called the D.H. Chen Foundation Gallery. A display that will be permanent is called Welcome to the Spinning Factory, and it recounts the narrative of the space. We also host 3 seasonal exhibitions every year. This one right now you see is Sky Patch by a Beijing artist, Yin Xiuzhen. In this show, she brings to us various different installations and artworks, including one really large installation called In Transit in the Hallway. And through her works, she's investigating a little bit about the idea of patchworking and textiles as a metaphor. And to the lower right, you can actually see an image of a student making one of those suitcases in the top. And her idea was really to bring together some members of the public and organizations to create this work, to really fulfill this idea of a sky patch or a patchwork. As you can see, this student in particular is actually creating a landmark in our neighborhood. It's this sort of like a twin tower. You can, if you look closely, each suitcase actually has like little architecture made out of fabric. They're very beautiful. And that's me on the left, so hello everyone. As I said, we have these 2 different components. We have a heritage focus, we have a contemporary focus, contemporary arts focus. So really bridging this is very important to us and quite a challenge that I face as I work with the public. Right here, we see quite a visual connection between the permanent gallery space and the seasonal exhibition space. This season, Yin Xiuzhen actually bridges the 2 areas for us with these red pennants that she often saw in the factory settings that her mother worked in. So she's bringing this industrial history of mainland China into the industrial history of Hong Kong. So this is more of like an explicit approach or explicit way of bridging those 2 elements, but more subtly through our programs, we want to bridge bringing in the heritage of our site, of our history into the contemporary. I just want to quickly go through this slide, which I think really echoes what Charlotte has just said. We're really thinking about from the get-go, working with people together to create our programs. Particularly, you'll see we really cherish this idea of being in conversations with one another and bringing in different community groups together. This is sort of a goal that we have. It's we're not an institution working with different community groups, but really bringing in very different parties together. I'll show you some examples in just a moment. You'll also see this emphasis on touching and making. As I said in an earlier example, textiles is both a subject matter, but also very tangible and material medium. Just as an example, you'll see right here, we work quite a lot with former workers in the area. Unlike a lot of institutions maybe around the world that deals with an industrial heritage, Hong Kong's industrial heritage, although we don't produce anymore, the people who are involved are still very much around. So we engage with them through, we ask them to provide workshops, to do machine demonstrations. But I think more importantly, we try to make their work visible through our exhibitions. So these, you know, they're not necessarily conventionally labeled as artists, but we try to put them into the exhibition space to form a dialogue or tell the audience that their work really matters. So you can see some exhibition photographs on the left of an exhibition we put up called Day Measures, where we incorporated audio and visual elements to narrate these stories. We also collect their stories through oral history. Aside from that community of retired veterans, we also engage with some of our docents. And I think during this time of social distancing, we really wanted to not lose any of our community. And to me, one big partnership that we have, or one big community that we engage with, is not external, but actually in the periphery of our institution, you know, these docents that we have, this frontline staff. So in the instance of COVID, we actually invited them back to actually direct and interpret an exhibition that could not be open to the public. I think thinking about these videos, to me, their objective was not to circulate to an ambitious amount of audience, but really to let the docents know that their voice still matters. So we try to accommodate what they envisioned in both more conventional sort of docent-led videos, but also if they felt like they wanted a certain format, like a stop motion, we tried to accommodate for that too. And I think this is a very important instance where we interact with a certain age group with a lot of feelings towards things that they're seeing. And this is their way of approaching it through contemporary art. And I think this is a very good venue for them to express things that they want to express in ways that are a little bit more creative and in a less explicit manner. Textiles is also quite a magical medium to me. It's mired in politics, economics, history, etc. But it's got this very tangible element too. And it constantly teaches us new ways of interacting with people. People of different, you know, people who are not like a lot of us, most of us. In this video, we see our artist in residence in the past, Tae-Yoon Choi. He actually uses textile and the language of garments as a way to help the visually impaired students understand this idea of an internet, or to feel what it's like to be in a web, of understand what a centralized web is, what a decentralized web is, what a distributed web is. So communicating these already very difficult concepts through tangible ways is a great benefit of textiles that we're still learning. And it still tries to inform us, and it reciprocates back to us. So in this sense, textiles really served as an agency, and it really helped us connect with people that we would not have connected with, and to develop new interpretations of this medium.
Bruce, this is great. I'm conscious of time, and I want to squeeze Liz's presentation in. So is it possible to cut it there?
Yes. Yes, I'll stop right here. This is an indigo project that we're developing.
Great. Thank you so much. It's been really useful insight. Liz, if we could go straight to you, and then we may have a minute or two for questions at the end.
Okay, I'll try and be brief. I'll whiz it.
Thank you.
So just can you see my screen okay?
Perfect.
Let's see if it'll let me go full screen. Okay. Yeah, so just to give very quickly a little bit of context to Open Eye Gallery, and I think this sounds similar to all of the speakers today, but we're a photography gallery based in Liverpool in the northwest of England, and we're constantly actually actively rethinking what a gallery space can be. We proactively take risks to have kind of spark crucial conversations with others about this. And we believe that photography can be a particularly powerful, also accessible tool to do this. Because of this, our programme is kind of therefore based on what we would call a co-authored model, which means that all strands of our programme, whether it be the gallery, events, public programme or residencies, are collaboratively conceived and produced with a diverse range of partnerships. So this is particularly relevant when looking at our socially engaged photography programme, which is a programme I look after, which brings photographers, community groups, community partners and our audiences together to explore kind of pertinent local issues, but also support ambitions for kind of wider social change. So with that in mind, here's a little screenshot of our partners, just some of them. So our partnerships are often actually cross-sector. So by that, it means we're bringing cultural, health, care sector, youth, criminal justice, education and university sector partners all together to shape our work and approach to practice. So each partner will co-commission a creative project with us, bringing their expertise from their context and acting as equal commissioners of that process, and will support the recruitment of the artists that we then go on to work with. So we make sure that it's the right artist for the right community in that sense. We work independently with partners to agree shared aims and objectives for each project, but we also like to bring partners together, usually in a real room, in this case it's been on Zoom, to have discussions around broader visions of our future. And actually, in a way, Open Eye Gallery sort of becomes, I guess, the seedling or the anchor point for us to get partners to meet other like-minded organisations where they may go off and then do their own collaborative projects together. So in terms of partnership working and how that works in delivery mode, within our socially engaged photography programme, these often consist of live residency projects on ground level, working with communities across the city region. And often these are in areas that are actually quite far away from our gallery building ourselves, which is in the city centre. But it's very much working with communities that may have little or no photography cultural provision locally where they are. So in all instances, we're inviting photographers to consider how can they co-author the ideas behind a project with that local community, but also then how can they actually physically co-produce the artwork made. So this is just a quick image of a project called We Are Kirby, where photographer Tony Mallon worked with a group of older residents to photograph the local high street shoppers in their area. And this was to document and discuss the issues around regeneration and redevelopment that the group themselves felt was kind of really pertinent for their local high street at the time. So in this instant, the local community, they become the photographers and the documentarians of their own local context. We also, however, feel passionately about supporting photographers and communities to co-curate and disseminate the work that is produced to the public or to a specific audience. So if we consider that we're saying that all our work is being made collaboratively, but then we go on and give the single curator or artist the control of that final imagery shared, it kind of defeats the point of trying to make co-authored work. So this example, it's just a couple of images of one project which we presented at one of our other partner venues, Tate Exchange in Tate, Liverpool, where we worked with photographer Stephanie Wynn and a group of 9 women from an area called the Wirral, who all came together to explore individually, but also together, key transformative moments in each of their women's lives, which connected both personally, but also globally to ideas around women's suffrage, education and health. Now, in this project, once the work was produced, the women were then also invited to think about how they might share their personal stories and responses to these photographs through the public. And this was done through a interactive game of playing cards, as you can see on the slide there. Now, when the public would pick up a card of a specific image, such as this image made with one of the women Puran, that woman would then come forward to share her individual story about the picture. So essentially, it's finding ways where we can put our participants and our collaborators at the centre stage, not only of the work produced, but also of the public programme. And this goes on further to talk about how this works in terms of our community partners. So this is the final slide. So we also work closely, as I said, with our project partners to ensure that the dissemination and distribution of photographic work reaches what I would say relevant audiences. So for this example, this is actually a recent lockdown zine that was on the right-hand side here. There's a publication in print and online produced by photographers Emma Case, Catherine Monaghan, and one of the groups we currently work with called the Clickmore Photography Group in North Liverpool. Now, despite the current restrictions of not being able to meet in person, the photographers worked really closely with the community to find ways for them to continue to engage remotely, online, via phone, via post. And actually, through all of this, managed to produce a collection of photographs and stories and a full-blown publication for public release. Now, we are working really closely with the community partners, my Club More, but also partners across our wider cultural and health networks to ensure that the zine can be distributed to as many relevant audiences as possible. So it's not necessarily about supporting the biggest reach, but it's about supporting the biggest impact with who we reach with the projects that we do. And I guess that kind of summarises our approach to partnership working on a whole. It comes from that point of conceiving a project right through to how we distribute it publicly and to who. So I'll stop there because I'm aware of time.
That's been brilliant. Thank you so much. I'm pleased to say Ying has offered us an extra couple of minutes just to sort of wrap up. So I hope everyone could stay with us for it. There's some interesting questions coming in on the chat, and there was one, if I can find it, which was about the question is, do you see the difference between social and community services and the role of art spaces that aim at projects of social and community participation? I guess this is a question is, are we venturing into some of our community-based projects? Are we venturing into territory that is, belongs to other services? I just wonder whether people have any kind of response to that. I don't think it's a criticism, but I think it's just an interesting kind of opening question. Liz, do you have a sense of?
Yeah, I think for us, that's why it's so important that we collaborate with community partners on the ground, and because potentially, they are the services that are organising or offering those other elements of community support. But what they're aware of is that they may have a kind of cultural or visual arts gap in their expertise. And so actually it's about bringing our expertise as a cultural organisation and their expertise as a community provision together, and to shape what we then do with communities collaboratively. So we can make sure that everybody's agenda is there, everybody's voice is heard within that room, and ultimately that we're doing the best that we can for that particular community. So I think it can be risky in that idea that what you don't want to ever do is repeat yourself or replicate offer, but actually if you can come together, then you can do something that's greater than its sum of its parts, I think.
James, can I say something too quickly?
Yeah, please, Stuart.
And I think for the programs that First Sight does, and in particular its Holiday Fund program, which started from a very art place, but again asking its community what was most needed, and it was about food. And so we set up a canteen, and it was a time when holiday hunger became more news. It's a lot of news right now here in the UK, but this was like 3 years ago, and we just started a canteen, and then we started putting other elements to it of you know, we're an art gallery, so how do you make that creative, but how do you give some people nourishment who are really struggling to do that? And that's kind of built over years and has received support from lots of people, and including the NHS. And I think that rather than straying onto someone else's patch, I think what we're finding by doing that project is that people that will come to an art gallery who might not then go and seek that support from another service, or that it can't, and that there is there's a well-being element to it. It's about how creativity can kind of nourish you as well as food, and I think we're, you know, there is a tradition within this of socially engaged practice that we might have been talking about if we were doing this seminar 5 years ago, of using that term, of kind of getting to a point and wanting to work people with what's most necessary. And I think art galleries can do that really well, and I think they do it really empathetically. So yes it is, but I think it's knowing in this search for what is the role of an art gallery in society today. I think that's why we're venturing into there, because we can do it really well with others.
Brilliant. Stuart, thank you so much. That's a very useful sort of summing up, I think, of the session. I just wanted to thank you all for your contribution. It's been a long panel, a large panel, and it's been difficult to sort of involve you all fully, but you've contributed brilliantly, and it's so inspiring to hear about the really authentic programs that you're delivering, and just how agile and adaptable you've all been during a period of great challenge. So I'll end it there. Thank you so much, and hand over to Ying.
Thank you, James. It's such an interesting discussion, and thank you all the panelists and sharing of your work. I found it really inspiring. I would like to encourage everyone to also try to attend tomorrow's panel discussion. We have 2 panels tomorrow, and the first one will be at 12 p.m. UK time and 8 p.m. Hong Kong time about It's an All Us activism. And the second one at 1:15 p.m. UK time and 9:15 p.m. Hong Kong time is about placemaking, utopian vision, and social experiments. There is a lot of interesting question and chat. We're trying to capture it from the chat function here and also on YouTube, and we are hoping to find a place that we can share it. So thank you so much, everyone. Have a good evening and have a good day for people in UK. Bye.